I can still feel the chill of that living room when my daughter turned to me and said those words that cut deeper than any knife. "You probably can't even remember my birthday." Her voice dripped with contempt, while my sister-in-law smiled that knowing smile from across the room. They all thought they knew the truth about me. The mother who never showed up, who never cared enough to celebrate her own daughter's special days. What they didn't know was the secret hidden in my basement. 22 videos spanning decades, each one capturing a solitary celebration with a cake, a candle, and tears that no one ever saw. 22 birthdays where I sang to an empty chair, wrapped presents that were never opened, and kept a vigil of love while being systematically erased from my daughter's life. They didn't know that every accusation of neglect was built on a foundation of carefully constructed lies. That night, something inside me finally broke. After decades of silence and shame, I decided it was time to reveal the truth, no matter how painful the aftermath might be. Would showing these tapes heal the wounds of a lifetime, or would they only deepen the rift between us? Follow my story to discover how the power of a mother's love can survive even the cruelest betrayal, and how the truth, no matter how long buried, always finds its way to the light. If this story touched your heart, please follow our channel for more powerful true stories of family, loss, and redemption. Like this video and comment below with who you're watching with today. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that need to be told. I can still feel the chill of that living room in Toledo, Ohio. The night that changed everything. The television was on, but nobody was really watching. My daughter Rebecca turned to me with a look I'll never forget, cold and distant, like I was nothing more than a stranger who had wandered into her perfect life. "You probably can't even remember my birthday," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. The words sliced through me like a razor. I was 73 years old, but in that moment, I felt small and helpless, like a child being scolded. The silence from my relatives sitting around us was deafening. My son-in-law smirked from the corner of the room. My grandson pretended to be engrossed in his phone. My sister-in-law, Martha, the one who had been poisoning my daughter against me for decades, just sat there with that knowing smile, like she'd finally won some twisted game I didn't know we were playing. I looked down at my weathered hands, spotted with age and trembling slightly. I said nothing, but inside, a secret burned like a quiet flame. If only they knew about the box hidden in my basement. If only they knew about the tapes. "Mom's having one of her moments again," Rebecca said to the room, not bothering to lower her voice. The others chuckled nervously. I had become the family joke. Poor old Mary. Always forgotten, always in the way. What they didn't know was that I had never forgotten a single one of her birthdays. Not one. Not since the old camera my late husband John gave me on her first birthday. "Record everything," he had told me back in 1979. Time passes too quickly. He died when Rebecca was only 7, but I kept his promise. For 22 years, I had marked every single birthday, even when they didn't invite me, even when they told me the party was just for close friends, even when Martha told me that Rebecca was too busy to see me. Those nights, I would sit alone in my small apartment, set up a single cupcake with a candle, and sing happy birthday to my absent daughter. I'd wrap a small gift and open it later, wondering if she would have liked it. All of it captured on those grainy tapes. My love, my loneliness, my stubborn refusal to be erased from her life. "What are you thinking about now, Mom?" Rebecca asked, her voice tinged with impatience. "You're just staring into space again." I looked up at her beautiful face, so much like John's, with those striking blue eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. My heart ached with a pain that medication couldn't touch. "Nothing, dear," I whispered. "Just old memories." "Well, try to stay present for once," she snapped. "We're discussing Thanksgiving plans." I nodded, but my mind was already back in the basement of my small house, where dusty boxes held the evidence that would shatter everything they thought they knew about me. 22 birthdays, 22 candles, 22 solitary celebrations for a daughter who believed I had abandoned her. I never meant to show her those tapes. They were my private ritual, my way of staying connected to a child who had been turned against me. But sitting there, watching her dismiss me so easily in front of everyone, something inside me finally broke. "I remember every birthday," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the television. "What was that?" Rebecca asked, annoyed at the interruption. I cleared my throat and spoke louder, my voice surprisingly steady. I said, I remember every single one of your birthdays, Rebecca. Her laugh was sharp and humorless. Right, Mom. Like you remembered to come to my 16th? Or my 21st? Or my 30th last year? The room grew uncomfortable. This wasn't part of the usual script. I was supposed to sit quietly and take whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. I wasn't invited, I said simply. Martha interjected quickly. Now, Mary, don't start with your stories again. Rebecca always wanted you there. You were just busy with your own life. The lie hung in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. I had never been busy. I had spent those years cleaning other people's houses, living in a tiny apartment, saving what little I could for my retirement. My only luxury had been that old camera and the tapes. I stood up slowly, my arthritic knees protesting. I have something to show you, Rebecca. Something I've been keeping for a very long time. Mom, not now, she sighed. We're in the middle of planning. It won't wait, I said, with a firmness that surprised even me. Not anymore. As I moved toward the door, I could feel everyone's eyes on me. They thought I was having some kind of senior moment, wandering off on a confused tangent. They had no idea that I was about to bring down the carefully constructed lies that had kept me separated from my only child for over 2 decades. I paused at the doorway and turned back to look at them, my family who didn't know me at all. I'll be right back, I said softly, and then we'll see who remembers what. I never quite pinpointed when the distance between us began to grow. Perhaps it was during her 10th birthday, the first one where I was physically turned away. I remember that day with painful clarity. April 16th, 1989. It had rained all morning, and I'd spent hours in my tiny kitchen baking a chocolate cake from scratch. I couldn't afford much, but I'd managed to save enough for a small silver bracelet with a heart charm. I wrapped it carefully in leftover Christmas paper, the only kind I had. By the time I arrived at Martha's sprawling colonial house in the suburbs, my shoes were soaked through from puddles and the cake box was slightly damp at the corners. I could hear children laughing inside, the muffled sound of "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" playing on the stereo. I remember smoothing down my discount store dress before ringing the doorbell, trying to look presentable despite the rain. Martha answered, her face immediately hardening when she saw me standing there. "Today's not a good day for you to show up, Mary," she said, blocking the doorway with her body. Behind her, I caught glimpses of colorful balloons and party decorations. Rebecca's having a special day with her friends. But I'm her mother, I said, my voice catching. I made her favorite cake. Martha's eyes flicked to the shabby cake box in my hands, a drop of rainwater sliding down the side. We already have a cake, a professional one, from that bakery in Sylvania. I stood there, rainwater dripping from my hair, clutching that homemade cake and the small wrapped gift. Through the crack in the door, I caught a fleeting glimpse of Rebecca in a pink party dress, surrounded by friends. Her face lit up with joy. She looked so happy without me. "Can I at least give her my present?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. Martha sighed dramatically. "Look, Mary, the party's already started. The girls are all excited. Let's not disrupt things. I'll make sure she gets it later." I handed over the small package, knowing I'd never find out if Rebecca liked it or even received it. As Martha took it, her wedding ring caught the light. A diamond so large it made my bare fingers feel even more naked. After John died, I'd had to sell my wedding band to pay for heating one particularly brutal winter. "I'll tell her you stopped by," Martha said, already closing the door. "Wait," I said quickly. "Just tell her I love her. Tell her happy birthday from Mom." Martha nodded, but her eyes held no warmth. "Of course." The door closed with a firm click. I stood there for several moments, rain soaking through my coat, tears mixing with the droplets on my face. In my hands, the cake began to sag, the cardboard box growing softer by the second. That night, I returned to my apartment, a one-bedroom above Schulman's Pharmacy downtown. I set up my old video camera on its tripod, positioned in front of my small Formica kitchen table. I placed a single candle in the center of the now lopsided cake and lit it with trembling hands. "Happy birthday to you," I sang quietly to the empty chair across from me. My voice broke on the words, "Dear Rebecca," and by the end I was crying too hard to finish. I blew out the candle myself and whispered to the camera, "I wish I could have been there today, sweetheart. Mom loves you so much. Maybe next year." That was the first tape, the first birthday I spent singing to a phantom daughter. I didn't know then that there would be 21 more. A terrible dilemma haunted me after that day. Should I fight harder to be in Rebecca's life? Should I confront Martha, demand my rightful place? Or should I step back, documenting my love quietly, hoping someday Rebecca would understand? I chose the latter, partly out of fear, partly out of a misguided sense that the truth would eventually come out on its own. I was raised to believe that good people don't cause scenes, that patience is rewarded, that truth always prevails. Maybe that was my greatest mistake. Over the following years, the pattern repeated with cruel consistency. Sometimes the excuses were delivered by phone. Rebecca's staying at a friend's house for her birthday this year. Sometimes they came through my sister-in-law. It's just family this time, Mary. The definition of family apparently didn't include me. Each year I would set up my camera, light a candle, and sing to the empty chair. Sometimes I'd tell the camera stories about when Rebecca was little, how she used to fall asleep on John's chest, how she loved the tire swing in our old backyard, how her first word was book. I wanted to preserve these memories for her, in case something happened to me before we reconnected. As I look back now, I realize that what hurt most wasn't just missing the birthdays, it was missing her growing up. I never saw her blow out candles at 16. I never helped her prepare for prom. I never moved her into her college dorm. I became a ghost in my own daughter's life, appearing only at obligatory holiday gatherings where I was treated with thinly veiled annoyance. And all the while, those tapes accumulated in my basement, a parallel history of birthdays never shared, a testament to a mother's love that refused to die, even when it was unwanted. It was Rebecca's 18th birthday when I purchased the tape that would eventually change everything. April had come again, bringing with it memories that stung like reopened wounds. That particular morning, I'd woken before dawn, my arthritic fingers already aching as I reached for the small calendar by my bedside. I had circled the date, April 16th, 1997, months in advance as I did every year. I remember the weather that day, unseasonably warm for spring in Ohio, with sunshine that seemed to mock my melancholy mood. I had the day off from cleaning houses, a rare luxury I always arranged for her birthday. My morning ritual began as it always did on this date. I opened the small cedar box where I kept her baby bracelet from the hospital, the only lock of her hair I'd managed to save, and a photograph of her at age 5, the last picture I had where she was genuinely smiling at me. After breakfast, just toast and coffee, my appetite always disappeared on her birthday, I walked 3 blocks to Riverside Department Store. The store was fading even then, struggling against the new mall that had opened across town, but they still had an electronics section in the back corner. Mr. Winslow, who had owned the place for over 40 years, nodded at me as I entered. He knew why I was there. "Got some fresh stock in last week, Mary," he said, leading me to the display of blank VHS tapes. These Japanese ones record better than the American brands, less static. I selected one with care, examining the plastic case as if I were purchasing a precious jewel. In many ways I was. This small rectangle would hold another year of my silent devotion, another proof of my enduring love. "It's for my daughter's birthday," I told him, as I did every year. He never asked questions, never mentioned that I'd been buying a single tape every April for nearly a decade. Perhaps he understood more than he let on. "On the house this time," he said gruffly, pushing away the crumpled $5 bill I offered. "I couldn't possibly," I began, but he shook his head. "You're one of my last regular customers, Mary. Consider it a loyalty discount." I clutched the tape to my chest as I walked home, feeling both grateful for his kindness and ashamed that my circumstances were so transparently desperate that even Mr. Winslow felt compelled to offer charity. Pride is a luxury that poverty slowly strips away. Back in my apartment, I set up the familiar scene, the small cake I'd purchased from the day-old section at Kroger, a single candle, my old camera balanced precariously on a stack of books. But this year felt different somehow. 18 was a milestone. My baby was officially an adult now, probably preparing for college somewhere, stepping into a future I would never be part of. A heaviness settled over me, different from the usual birthday melancholy. Perhaps it was the realization that legally, she no longer needed me at all. Whatever tenuous connection remained could now be severed completely without social consequences. The thought left me breathless with fear, so I decided to do something I'd never done before. Instead of just singing and blowing out the candle, I would speak directly to her, as if someday she might actually watch this tape. I would leave her a message that transcended time and distance. I pressed record, adjusted my cardigan, the blue one John had given me on our last Christmas together, and looked straight into the lens. "Darling Rebecca," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "If you're watching this, if you ever watch any of these, I want you to know that your mother never forgot. Not a single birthday. Not a single day." Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to continue. "I don't know what they've told you about me. I don't know why I wasn't allowed to be there for you. But I want you to know that not a day has passed when I didn't think of you, pray for you, love you with my whole heart." I was about to continue when the phone rang, startling me. I nearly knocked over the camera reaching for the receiver, forgetting to pause the recording. "Hello?" I answered, trying to compose myself. "Mary, it's Bill." My brother's voice sounded tired, as it always did these days. "Oh, Bill. Hello." I dabbed at my eyes with my sleeve, turning slightly away from the camera but still in frame. He sighed heavily before speaking. "I just wanted to check on you. I know what day it is." Bill was the only person who ever acknowledged these phantom birthdays with me. Though he lived 2 states away in Illinois, he never forgot to call. "I'm fine," I lied, as I always did. "Just making my video." There was a pause, then he spoke more quietly, as if afraid of being overheard. "They don't want you there, Mary. They told me so directly this time. They say that you complicate things." My hand tightened around the receiver. "Complicate things? What does that even mean, Bill?" "Martha says that Rebecca gets upset when you're mentioned, that it disrupts her life." He hesitated before adding, "They're having a big party for her tonight. Some country club downtown." I closed my eyes against the pain. A country club. Martha and her husband Harold, my late husband's brother, had money I could never provide. They gave Rebecca the life of privilege I couldn't. Private school, summer camps, horseback riding lessons. Perhaps that was why it had been so easy to push me aside. "Thank you for telling me," I managed to say. "I'm sorry, Mary. It's not right what they're doing." After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, forgetting the camera was still recording. It captured everything. My slumped shoulders, my silent tears, the way I finally squared myself and returned to face the lens. "I'll always be here," I said simply, "whenever you're ready to find me." I didn't realize then that this particular tape would become crucial evidence years later. I didn't know that Bill's seemingly innocuous words, "They don't want you there," would eventually shatter the carefully constructed narrative that I had willingly abandoned my daughter. It was just another birthday, another small candle drowning in its own wax, another lonely vigil for a mother without her child. But sometimes the most ordinary moments contain seeds of extraordinary change. This small, cheap tape from Riverside department store would eventually bring down a wall built of decades of lies. The Hendersons' house always smelled like cinnamon and wealth. 3 stories of red brick and white columns in Sylvania's most exclusive neighborhood. It loomed over a perfectly manicured lawn where not even a single dandelion dared to grow. Every Monday and Thursday for 15 years, I cleaned that house from top to bottom, polishing silver I could never afford and dusting crystal I was afraid to touch. Mrs. Henderson liked to talk about her children while I scrubbed her floors. She'd perch on a kitchen stool, coffee cup in hand, showing me photographs of birthday parties, ballet recitals, and graduation ceremonies. "Brandon just got accepted to Yale," she told me one spring morning, sliding a glossy photograph across the granite countertop. "Full scholarship. We're so proud." I smiled and nodded as I wiped down her refrigerator, keeping my eyes on the stainless steel rather than the beaming young man in the cap and gown. He looked about Rebecca's age. I wondered if my daughter had graduated college by now. I hadn't been invited to that ceremony either. "You have children, don't you, Mary?" Mrs. Henderson asked suddenly, as if just remembering I was a person with a life outside her home. "A daughter," I said quietly, wringing out my cloth over the sink. "Rebecca. How lovely. What does she do?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I didn't know. I didn't know if my only child had gone to college, if she had a career, if she was married, if I had grandchildren. The realization must have shown on my face because Mrs. Henderson quickly changed the subject. "Those baseboards in the dining room are looking dingy," she said, sliding off her stool. "Make sure you get into all the corners today." Later that afternoon, I baked a chocolate cake for Brandon Henderson's going-away party. Mrs. Henderson hovered nearby, directing me on the exact thickness of the frosting. "Not too much on the sides," she instructed, "and make sure the top is perfectly smooth." I worked with careful precision. thinking of all the birthday cakes I'd never been allowed to make for Rebecca. My hands moved mechanically while my mind wandered to a parallel life where I was standing in my own kitchen, baking for my own child, telling her how proud I was of her accomplishments. "You're quite good at this," Mrs. Henderson remarked, sounding genuinely surprised. "Where did you learn to bake?" "My mother taught me," I replied, smoothing the dark frosting with practiced strokes. "And I used to bake for my daughter when she was little." Before, I trailed off, unwilling to share my pain with this woman who had everything I'd lost. "Before what?" she prompted, curiosity overriding her usual disinterest in my personal affairs. "Before her father died," I said simply, deciding that partial truth was easier than the whole complicated story. "Things changed after that." Mrs. Henderson made a sympathetic noise, the kind people make when they don't know what to say, but feel obligated to acknowledge your suffering. "Well, Brandon will love this cake. He's always had a sweet tooth." That night, I returned to my small apartment above Goldstein's Pharmacy on Monroe Street. The building was old, with creaking floors and temperamental plumbing, but the rent was affordable on my housekeeper's salary. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Mr. Goldstein counting inventory downstairs after closing time. The steady murmur of numbers a comforting background to my solitary evenings. I'd moved there after selling John's and my small house in West Toledo. The medical bills after his heart attack had left me with few options. The apartment was barely big enough for one person, let alone the boxes of memories I'd brought with me. John's clothes that I couldn't bear to part with, Rebecca's baby toys, and of course, the growing collection of birthday tapes. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table and stared at the blank walls. A dull ache throbbed behind my breastbone, familiar but sharper than usual. I'd been having these pains more frequently lately, a tightness that sometimes left me breathless. Dr. Patel had diagnosed it as angina last year, prescribing tiny pills to place under my tongue when the pain struck. "Stress makes it worse," he'd warned. "Try to avoid emotional upheaval." I almost laughed at the memory of his advice as I placed a pill under my tongue, waiting for the pain to subside. Avoid emotional upheaval. As if that were possible when every day was a quiet battle against the grief of losing both my husband and my daughter, one to death, the other to something I still couldn't fully understand. The secret of my heart condition was one I kept carefully guarded. Bill knew, but no one else. Certainly not Martha or Harold, who would probably see it as yet another inconvenience I might cause them. And definitely not Rebecca, though I often wondered what she would do if I died suddenly. Would she come to the funeral? Would she cry? Or would she just send flowers with a card signed hastily, an obligation fulfilled? The pills helped, but the doctors had made it clear that my heart was getting weaker. Without proper treatment I couldn't afford on my meager income and limited insurance, the prognosis wasn't good. So each birthday video I recorded carried an extra weight of urgency. They weren't just records of my love. They were potential goodbyes. Sometimes in my darkest moments, I imagined Rebecca finding the tapes after I was gone. I pictured her watching them one by one, years of solitary celebrations unfolding before her eyes. The truth finally revealed, too late for reconciliation. Would she feel regret then? Would she finally understand? I shook away the morbid thought and opened my worn address book. There, on the last page, I kept the small obituary clipping about Martha's mother, my former mother-in-law, and the bitter family dispute that had erupted after her death. The inheritance had been substantial, and Martha had made sure I received nothing, despite John's mother's verbal promises to me before she died. That old wound had festered for years, poisoning whatever fragile relationship might have survived between us. Was that the root of it all? Had Martha's resentment over money turned into a systematic campaign to erase me from Rebecca's life? The thought made my chest tighten again, and I reached for another pill, wondering how many heartaches one small organ could bear before it simply gave up. As the years passed, Rebecca's birthdays began to blur together in a painful montage of absence. My little ritual remained unchanged. The cake, the candle, the camera. While she grew up in photographs I occasionally glimpsed at family gatherings. Those rare holiday encounters were always tense, choreographed affairs where I played my assigned role as the forgotten mother. I remember one particular Thanksgiving at Harold and Martha's house. It must have been 2003 because Rebecca had just started working at some law firm in Columbus. I sat at the far end of the dining table, wedged between Harold's elderly uncle and one of Martha's cousins, who kept asking me to pass the gravy long after it had been emptied. From my isolated position, I could just make out Rebecca's animated conversation with her then-boyfriend David, a tall man with thick glasses and an expensive watch. "We're thinking about moving in together after the new year," Rebecca announced to the table, though her eyes deliberately avoided my corner. "David's firm is opening a Toledo branch, and they've offered him a junior partnership." Martha clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, that's wonderful. You'll be closer to family again." Family. The word hung in the air like a barbed taunt. I stared down at my barely touched turkey and stuffing, willing myself to remain composed. Family apparently didn't include me, though I lived less than 20 minutes away from Harold and Martha's house. Later, as I helped clear the dishes, always relegated to kitchen duty with the teenagers, I overheard David speaking to Harold in the hallway. They didn't notice me standing just around the corner, my arms full of dirty plates. "Rebecca never talks about her mother," David said, his voice lowered but still audible over the clattering of dishes in the kitchen. "I mean, her real mother, Mary." Harold's response was immediate and dismissive. Mary wasn't around much. Too busy with her own life, I guess. "Martha practically raised Rebecca after John died." "That's harsh," David replied, "to just abandon your kid like that. Some women aren't cut out for motherhood," Harold said sagely, as if imparting great wisdom. "Rebecca was better off with us, trust me. Mary never even showed up for birthdays or school events, not even when Rebecca was a child." The plates in my hands began to tremble. I wanted to step around that corner to throw those dishes onto the hardwood floor, to scream the truth at both of them. I wasn't allowed to come. I was systematically excluded. I begged to be part of her life, but I didn't. Instead, I quietly entered the kitchen and placed the dishes in the sink, excusing myself to the bathroom where I cried silently into a monogrammed hand towel that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. When I returned, red-eyed but composed, Rebecca and David were preparing to leave. She gave me a brief, obligatory hug, the kind strangers exchange at church services. "Bye, Mom," she said flatly, already turning toward the door. "See you at Christmas, maybe." "Happy early birthday," I murmured, knowing I wouldn't be invited to her celebration the following April. She'd be turning 25, a quarter-century that I had largely witnessed from afar. She looked at me strangely. "Thanks," she said, before Martha smoothly guided her toward the door, effectively cutting off any further conversation. The following spring brought another birthday, another solitary celebration in my apartment. I was 61 then, with more gray than brown in my hair and hands that ached constantly from years of scrubbing other people's floors. The camera I used was the same one John had given me, though it had been repaired so many times that the repairman at Jefferson Electronics joked it was more electrical tape than machine. "You should really upgrade, Mrs. Winters," he told me the last time I brought it in. "They make digital cameras now, much better quality." But I couldn't bear to change the one constant in my ritual. That camera had seen it all. My tears, my aging face, my unwavering love documented year after year. For Rebecca's 25th birthday, I splurged on a small cake from Schmidt's Bakery instead of making one myself. My hands weren't as steady as they once were, and I wanted this milestone birthday to be special, even if I was the only one celebrating it. I set up the camera on its tripod, positioned the cake with its single candle, and pressed record. The familiar red light blinked on, capturing the moment as it had for so many years. "Happy birthday, Rebecca," I began, my voice wavering slightly. 25 years ago today, you came into this world at 3:47 in the morning. You were so tiny, just 6 pounds, 4 ounces, but you had the strongest grip. You wrapped your little fingers around mine in the hospital, and I promised I would never let go." I paused, swallowing hard against the knot in my throat. "I tried to keep that promise. I want you to know that. Whatever they've told you about me, whatever reasons they've given for my absence in your life, they aren't true." I hadn't planned to say that. In all the previous videos, I'd never directly addressed the lies. But something had shifted inside me after hearing Harold's casual dismissal of my motherhood. A quiet anger had taken root alongside the grief. "Your Aunt Martha and Uncle Harold didn't want me at your birthdays," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "They told people I didn't care enough to come, but I cared, Rebecca. I've always cared." I gestured to the small cake before me. "This is the 25th cake I've bought or baked for you. 25 candles I've blown out while wishing you were here. 25 years of loving you from a distance I never wanted." Tears spilled down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. Let the camera capture this raw truth, I thought. Let it record every painful detail. I don't know if you'll ever see these videos. I don't know if you'll ever want to know the truth, but I keep making them because someday you might ask questions. And when you do, I want the answers to be waiting for you. I lit the candle with trembling hands, watching the small flame flicker in the still air of my apartment. "Happy birthday to you," I sang softly, my voice breaking on the familiar melody. "Happy birthday, dear Rebecca. Happy birthday to you." I blew out the candle, sending a silent wish into the universe that someday, somehow, my daughter would find her way back to me. The confrontation came on a bitter February evening in 2021, decades after my exile began. Outside, Toledo was gripped by the kind of cold that seems to crystallize the air itself, turning breath into ghost-like plumes and making the bare tree branches crack in the darkness. Inside Martha and Harold's warm living room, a different kind of chill permeated the atmosphere. I hadn't planned to attend the family dinner that night. My doctor had advised against unnecessary stress after my latest heart episode, but Bill had insisted, claiming it was important for the whole family to be together for Harold's retirement celebration. Looking back, I wonder if my brother somehow knew what would happen, if he had orchestrated this moment of reckoning. Rebecca and her husband David were there, along with their teenage son Michael, whom I hardly knew. My grandson. Even thinking those words sent a pang through my chest. He had Rebecca's eyes, but David's serious demeanor, his attention focused on his phone throughout dinner, barely acknowledging my presence. Like mother, like son, I supposed, though I couldn't blame the boy. To him, I was just a peripheral figure, a strange old woman who appeared at occasional family functions, sitting quietly in corners. The tension began during dessert. Martha's famous apple pie, served with vanilla ice cream that melted too quickly under the dining room's bright chandelier. Harold had been talking about their plans to travel during retirement, when Rebecca casually mentioned her upcoming birthday trip to the Cayman Islands. "It's a big one this year," she said, smiling at David. 42, time to treat myself. 42 isn't usually considered a milestone, Martha remarked, cutting herself another sliver of pie. "But I suppose any excuse for a tropical vacation works." The conversation drifted to beaches and resorts, but something had shattered inside me at Rebecca's casual mention of her age. 42 years. More than 4 decades of birthdays I'd marked in solitude, of cakes eaten alone, of songs sung to an empty chair. And here she was, casually planning a celebration that once again wouldn't include me. "I remember your first birthday," I said suddenly, my voice cutting through a discussion about snorkeling versus scuba diving. "You smashed your cake with both hands and got frosting all over your father's new tie." The table fell silent. Rebecca stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "Mom," she said finally, her voice tight with controlled irritation, "you don't need to make things up. We all know you weren't there." "I was there," I insisted, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "I was there for your first birthday, and your second, and your third. After that, I wasn't allowed to be." Martha's face hardened. "Mary, this isn't the time." "When is the time?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "It's been 42 years. When exactly is the right time to tell the truth?" Rebecca let out an exasperated sigh, the kind reserved for troublesome children or senile elders. "Mom, please don't start with your stories again. We're celebrating Uncle Harold's retirement." "Stories?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "Is that what you think they are? Stories? What else would they be?" She replied coldly. "You've been rewriting history for years, trying to make yourself the victim. Aunt Martha and Uncle Harold have told me how it really was. You were never there. You never showed up." The familiar pain bloomed in my chest, but it wasn't my heart this time, or at least, not in the medical sense. It was deeper, more primal. The pain of being erased, of having my love and my suffering dismissed as fantasy. "You don't know," I whispered. "You don't know anything." Martha stood abruptly. "I think it's time you went home, Mary. You're clearly upset." Something in me snapped. After decades of acquiescence, of polite retreat, of swallowing hurt and anger, something finally broke. "No," I said firmly, rising shakily to my feet. "Not this time." I looked directly at Rebecca, whose face had flushed with embarrassment or anger. I couldn't tell which. "Wait here," I told her. "All of you, wait right here." I made my way down the hallway to the guest room where I'd left my purse and coat. Inside my worn leather handbag was a small key, the key to the locked cabinet in my basement where I kept the tapes. I'd brought it on impulse, perhaps sensing that tonight would be different. "Mom, what are you doing?" Rebecca called after me, her voice tinged with impatience. I didn't answer. Instead, I retrieved my phone, a simple flip model that Bill had insisted I get for emergencies, and dialed his number. "I need you to bring the box," I said when he answered. "The one in the locked cabinet. Bring it to Martha's now." There must have been something in my voice that brooked no argument. Bill simply said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Martha was speaking in hushed tones to Harold, while David looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. Rebecca sat rigidly in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What's going on?" she demanded when I sat back down. "We're going to watch some home movies," I replied simply. The 20 minutes it took Bill to arrive felt like hours. No one seemed to know what to say, so we sat in strained silence, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the occasional buzz of Michael's phone. When the doorbell finally rang, I rose to answer it myself. Though Martha tried to intercept me, Bill stood on the porch, snow dusting his gray hair, holding the cardboard box I'd described. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly as he handed it over. I nodded. "It's time." Back in the living room, I set the box down on the coffee table with a soft thud. Everyone had migrated there from the dining room, curiosity apparently overriding their annoyance. "What is this?" Rebecca asked, eyeing the box suspiciously. "Your birthdays," I replied, opening the lid to reveal dozens of VHS tapes, each labeled with a date. "All of them." Martha stepped forward, her face pale. "Mary, this is ridiculous. We don't even have a VHS player anymore." "I brought one," Bill said from the doorway, holding up an old, bulky machine. "And I've got the cables to connect it to your TV." While Bill set up the equipment, I selected a tape from the middle of the box. Rebecca's 16th birthday. It seemed fitting somehow, a pivotal age, the one where she had truly started to believe I didn't care. When the ancient VCR finally hummed to life, the room fell silent. The screen flickered, then filled with my much younger face, sitting at my small kitchen table with a store-bought cake adorned with a sweet 16 decoration. "Happy birthday, Rebecca," my recorded self said, voice trembling slightly. 16 years old today, I can hardly believe it. Rebecca stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. "I tried to call, but your Aunt Martha said you were out with friends. I hope you're having a wonderful celebration." The younger me on screen attempted a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I got you something, it's not much, but..." I watched as my past self held up a small jewelry box, opening it to reveal a simple silver locket. "It was my mother's," the recorded me explained. I thought you might like to have it someday." The camera captured my face crumpling as I set the box down. "I miss you, sweetheart. I miss you every day." I glanced at Rebecca and saw her hands were trembling. But it was when the recording captured the background noise, the phone ringing, my younger self answering it, that everything changed. "Hello? Oh, hi, Bill." A pause. "No, they said she's out with friends." "No, they wouldn't tell me where." "What do you mean they're having the party right now?" "How do you know that?" Rebecca's head snapped toward Martha, whose face had gone ashen. "They don't want you there, Mary." My brother's voice could be clearly heard through the phone. "They told me so directly." The tape continued, showing my devastation, my silent tears, my eventual return to the ritual of singing "Happy Birthday" to an empty chair before the screen went to static. In the silence that followed, Rebecca turned to me, her eyes wide with confusion and the first flickers of a terrible understanding. "There are 22 more tapes just like that one," I said quietly. "One for every birthday since you were 5 years old." The silence that followed the static on the television screen was deafening. Rebecca sat motionless, her face drained of color, her eyes fixed on the now blank screen as if waiting for some explanation to appear there. Martha had sunk into Harold's recliner, her perfectly manicured hands clutching the armrests so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. Harold stood behind her, his expression unreadable behind his wire-rimmed glasses. It was David who broke the silence, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Maybe we should give everyone some privacy to discuss." "No," Rebecca interrupted, her voice unnaturally high and tight. "I want you to stay. I want everyone to stay." She turned to me, her eyes wide with confusion and the first flickers of anger. Not at me, not yet, but at the situation, at the sudden realization that something in her life's narrative didn't add up. "Show me another one," she demanded. Bill, who had been standing quietly by the VCR, looked at me questioningly. I nodded and reached into the box, selecting another tape, this one from her 21st birthday. The VCR made a mechanical whirring sound as it accepted the cassette, and once again my face appeared on the screen. The me from 2000 looked tired, with deeper lines around my eyes and more gray streaking through my hair. The ritual was the same. A small cake, a single candle, a quiet song. But this time I held up a bottle of champagne. "I thought we might have shared your first legal drink together," my recorded self said with a sad smile. "I've been saving this since you were born. Your father bought it the day we brought you home from the hospital. He said we'd open it on your 21st birthday, all together." The camera captured me opening the bottle with trembling hands, pouring a single glass and raising it in a toast to the empty chair across from me. "To Rebecca," I said on screen, my voice cracking. "My beautiful, brilliant daughter. Wherever you are tonight, whatever you're doing, I hope you're happy. I hope you know you're loved." Rebecca made a small, choked sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Turn it off," Martha said suddenly, her voice sharp with panic. "This is manipulative nonsense. Mary has always had a flair for dramatics." Rebecca whirled on her aunt, her face flushed now with growing anger. "Let me see the rest." "There's nothing to see," Martha insisted, rising from the chair. "Just your mother's pathetic attempts to rewrite history. She abandoned you, Rebecca. She chose her freedom over motherhood. We gave you everything she couldn't." "Is that true?" Rebecca asked, turning to me. Her voice was quiet but intense, like the stillness before a storm. "Did you abandon me?" I met her gaze steadily, feeling strangely calm in the eye of this emotional hurricane. "No. I tried to be part of your life every single day. They shut me out." "Liar!" Martha shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "You were never there. You missed everything important. Because you told everyone I wasn't invited." I shot back, my own anger finally breaking through decades of resigned silence. "You told Rebecca I didn't want to come. You told her I didn't care." Rebecca stood abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against Harold and Martha's polished hardwood floor. "Stop it. Both of you, just stop." She turned to her uncle, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the exchange. "Uncle Harold, is this true? Did you and Aunt Martha keep Mom away?" Harold removed his glasses, cleaning them methodically with the edge of his sweater, a nervous habit I'd observed over the years. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, reasonable, the voice of a man accustomed to being believed. "Rebecca, you have to understand. After your father died, Mary was in no condition to raise a child. She was emotionally unstable, financially insecure. We did what we thought was best for you. By lying to me," Rebecca's voice cracked, "by making me believe my own mother didn't want me." "We never said that exactly," Martha interjected quickly. "We simply emphasized her absences and downplayed the times she did try to reach out. We wanted to protect you from disappointment." "Protect me?" Rebecca echoed incredulously. "I grew up thinking my mother didn't love me enough to show up for my birthdays. And you call that protection?" The weight of this revelation seemed to physically affect her. She staggered slightly, reaching for the back of her chair to steady herself. David moved to her side, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder, which she shrugged off immediately. "Don't touch me right now," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "I need to think." She turned to face Martha, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen in my daughter before. For 22 years you told me she didn't care enough to come, that she was too busy with her own life, that she forgot my birthdays." Martha's face had taken on a defensive, almost petulant expression. "We gave you everything, Rebecca. Everything. A beautiful home, private school, college without debt. What could she have given you but instability and struggle?" "The truth," Rebecca shouted, her voice echoing off the high ceiling of the living room. "You could have given me the truth. You could have let me decide who I wanted in my life instead of making that choice for me." She turned to her husband, who was watching the scene unfold with wide, shocked eyes. "Did you know about this? When you told me my mother probably couldn't even remember my birthday, did you know it was a lie?" David shook his head, looking genuinely bewildered. "I only knew what you told me, what they told me. I had no idea." Rebecca's gaze swept around the room, finally landing on her teenage son, who had looked up from his phone at the commotion, his expression a mixture of confusion and uncomfortable fascination at seeing the adults in his life come apart at the seams. "Michael," she said, her voice suddenly gentle, "go wait in the car, please." "But Mom." "Now, Michael, please." When the front door closed behind him, Rebecca turned back to face us all. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice was surprisingly steady. "I trusted you," she said to Martha and Harold. "I believed everything you told me about her. I built my entire understanding of my childhood on your version of events." She took a deep, shuddering breath, then continued, "I need time to process this. I need space from all of you right now." Without another word, she grabbed her coat from the hall closet and stormed out the front door, leaving behind a silence so profound it seemed to have physical weight. David lingered awkwardly for a moment, looking between me and the Carmichaels, clearly uncertain where his loyalties should lie in this family schism. "I should go with her," he finally said. "She shouldn't drive when she's this upset." After he left, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation I'd imagined for decades had finally happened, but instead of relief, I felt only a bone-deep weariness. The truth was out, but at what cost? Rebecca was devastated, confused, angry. The family was fractured, perhaps beyond repair. Martha stood by the fireplace, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "Are you happy now, Mary? You've turned her against us. After everything we did for her." I looked at my sister-in-law, this woman who had systematically erased me from my daughter's life, and felt a strange mix of anger and pity. "I didn't turn her against you, Martha," I said quietly. "The truth did." I gathered my coat and purse, nodding to Bill that I was ready to leave. As we walked to the door, I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest, the familiar warning sign of my heart condition, intensified by the emotional stress of the evening. I clutched the doorframe, waiting for it to pass, wondering if the price of truth would be higher than I could afford to pay. 4 days passed before Rebecca came to my door. 4 days of silence during which I alternated between hope and despair, checking my phone constantly though it rarely rang. Bill called daily, offering updates he'd gleaned from Harold, who reported that Rebecca wasn't speaking to any of them either. She had taken time off work, citing a family emergency, and was processing whatever that meant. It was late afternoon when the knock came. 3 hesitant taps that I might not have heard had I not been sitting in my living room armchair, staring out the window at the February snow. My heart stuttered painfully as I rose to answer, taking a moment to smooth my hair and straighten my cardigan, as if appearances mattered at a time like this. When I opened the door, the sight of her standing on my porch nearly took my breath away. Rebecca looked exhausted, dark circles shadowing her eyes, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a careless ponytail. She wore no makeup, and without it, she looked younger somehow, more vulnerable, more like the little girl I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked formally, as if she were a stranger requesting entrance rather than my only child. I stepped aside wordlessly, gesturing her into the small house I'd managed to buy after years of saving. It wasn't much, a modest 2-bedroom on the outskirts of Toledo, with faded wallpaper and outdated appliances, but it was mine, free and clear. A far cry from Martha and Harold's mini mansion, but it was home. Rebecca stood awkwardly in the center of my living room, taking in the worn furniture, the crocheted afghans, the wall of framed photographs, most of them of her, collected secondhand from relatives or copied from social media over the years. Her eyes lingered on a school portrait from her senior year of high school, prominently displayed though I hadn't been invited to her graduation. "Your house is nice," she said finally, the polite banality of the comment highlighting the vast emotional chasm between us. "Thank you," I replied, equally formal. "Would you like some tea? Or coffee?" She shook her head. "No, thank you. I can't stay long. Michael has a basketball game later." My grandson, playing basketball, another milestone I'd missed. I nodded and gestured to the sofa. "Please sit." She perched on the edge of the cushion, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I noticed she wore no rings. Not her wedding band, not the diamond engagement ring David had given her, not even the small ruby she usually wore on her right hand. Her fingers were bare, as if she'd stripped herself of identities and connections before coming here. "I've been thinking about what happened," she began, her voice steady though her hands betrayed her nervousness. twisting around each other like restless birds. About the tapes, about everything. I sat in my armchair across from her, giving her space, afraid to hope, afraid to speak lest I say the wrong thing and shatter this fragile moment. I don't know how to process this, she continued after a moment. Everything I thought I knew about my childhood, about you, about my relationship with Aunt Martha and Uncle Harold, it's all built on lies. Not everything, I said gently. They did love you, Rebecca. They did give you advantages I couldn't have provided. That part was real. She looked up surprised. You're defending them, after what they did? I sighed, feeling the weight of decades on my shoulders. I'm not defending their lies, but I want you to know that not everything in your life has been false. They did care for you, in their way. By poisoning me against my own mother? Her voice rose slightly, anger flashing in her eyes. By systematically erasing you from my life? Is that love? It's complicated, I said, knowing how inadequate the words were. Martha always resented me. I think she was jealous of the bond I had with John, with his mother. After John died, she saw an opportunity to rewrite the story. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Why didn't you fight harder? She finally asked, the question I'd been dreading for decades. Why didn't you take them to court for custody or visitation rights? Why did you just accept it? The question cut deep, reopening an old wound of guilt and regret I'd carried for years. I did try at first, I said quietly, but I had no money for lawyers. Harold had connections in the legal community, and they made it clear that if I pushed, they would make things difficult for you. Difficult how? They threatened to move away, to take you somewhere I couldn't find you. They said they'd tell you I was unstable, unfit, and I was afraid. My voice caught and I had to take a deep breath before continuing. I was afraid you would believe them. I was afraid of losing you completely. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. So you settled for birthday videos I would never see. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Can I see them? She asked suddenly. All of them? The request caught me off guard. You want to watch the tapes? I need to, she said simply. I need to see what I missed, what was taken from me. I rose shakily and retrieved the box from the spare bedroom where Bill had left it after the confrontation at Martha's house. Setting it on the coffee table between us, I lifted the lid, revealing the neatly labeled collection of my solitary vigils. Rebecca reached in and touched one of the tapes gently as if it might disintegrate under her fingers. 22 birthdays, she whispered. 22 years of my life I can never get back. I know, I said softly. I'm so sorry. She looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. What are you sorry for? You didn't do this. They did. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger, I admitted. I'm sorry I didn't find a way to break through the barriers they built. I'm sorry I settled for loving you from a distance when I should have been there, holding your hand, brushing your hair, kissing you goodnight. A tear slipped down her cheek, then another, and suddenly she was crying in earnest. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. Without thinking, I moved to sit beside her on the sofa, hesitantly placing a hand on her shoulder. To my surprise, she turned toward me, burying her face against my shoulder as she cried. Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as I'd longed to do for so many years, stroking her hair as I murmured soothing nonsense, the way I had when she was a colicky infant. I don't know how to forgive them, she said when the storm of tears had subsided somewhat. I don't know if I can. You don't have to decide that now, I told her. Forgiveness takes time, sometimes a lifetime. She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't even know how to be around you, she admitted. I've spent so many years seeing you as this peripheral figure, this woman who wasn't really my mother in any meaningful way, and now I have to completely reimagine our relationship. The honesty hurt, but I appreciated it. We can take it slowly, I said, one day at a time. She nodded, then reached for the box of tapes again. Will you watch these with me? Not all at once, but over time? The question made my heart swell with a cautious hope. Yes, I said. Whenever you're ready. Rebecca checked her watch reluctantly. I should go. Michael's game. Of course, I said, rising with her. Thank you for coming. At the door she paused, turning back to face me with an expression of uncertainty and determination mingled on her tear-streaked face. I don't know what happens next, she said honestly. I don't know if we can rebuild what was taken from us, but I want to try. The words were simple, but they were everything I'd waited decades to hear. "So do I replied. As she walked to her car, I stood in the doorway watching her go, feeling a strange mixture of grief for what we had lost and hope for what might still be possible. The truth hadn't magically healed our broken relationship. No revelation could erase decades of alienation overnight, but it had opened a door that had been sealed shut for far too long. The lesson I learned through all those solitary birthdays, through all the years of silence and separation, was that sometimes the deepest wounds aren't inflicted by what people do, but by what they say. Words have the power to rewrite reality, to poison relationships, to create rifts that seem unbridgeable. Martha's whispered lies had kept my daughter from me more effectively than any physical barrier could have done. But words also have the power to heal, to bridge those chasms, to restore what was broken. And perhaps with time and patience and truth, Rebecca and I could find our way back to each other, birthday by birthday, conversation by conversation, truth by truth. As Mary's story comes to a close, we're left to wonder about the true power of perseverance and a mother's unwavering love. For 22 years, she kept faith alive in the silence of her small apartment, marking birthdays that no one allowed her to celebrate, preserving memories that no one wanted her to keep. What would you have done in her place? Would you have found the strength to continue loving from a distance, or would you have given up, believing the narrative others created about you? Perhaps the most profound lesson in Mary's journey is how easily truth can be buried beneath layers of convenient lies. A single whispered falsehood repeated often enough became the foundation upon which Rebecca built her understanding of her mother and herself. How many relationships in our own lives might be based on misunderstandings or deliberate deceptions? How many connections have we lost because we accepted someone else's version of events without questioning? The road to healing for Mary and Rebecca will be long, but it begins with the courage to face truth, no matter how painful. In your own life, is there a truth you've been afraid to confront? Is there a relationship waiting to be restored? Sometimes, like Mary, we must be brave enough to open the boxes in our basements and let the light shine on what has been hidden for far too long. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Follow our channel for more powerful stories of redemption, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Like and comment below with your thoughts. What would you have done in Mary's situation?